Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 5 of my 2001 Clavius dome base 3D printed. I thought I was going to wrap this up in this video with a finale, but I'm really close, and I'll talk about that throughout the video. But definitely one more after this will complete it, and that won't be too long from now. But quite a lot completed, a lot of the outer details, decorating the outside of the dome. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so a couple people had suggested this. A company called Bellfine out of Japan makes some cool little versions of the 2001 crafts. So they make the Ares 1B, they make the pod. These two come in a set. It's pretty sweet, actually. Two different scales, of course. Really cool little moon base. They also make the moon bus that comes with the space clipper, and they make the Discovery. So you can't really find them in the US, or I haven't been able to find them in the US. So I had to order from Japan off of eBay. Really didn't take too long. It got here in less than a week with FedEx from them, which is pretty cool. So it's a pretty cool little ship for sure. Some of the painting isn't quite right, like those aren't totally black at the bottom, but obviously it's not hollow or lit up or openable, anything like that. But I wanted to get the idea of the actual scale. So the only way we know the scale of the ship to the dome, since we never see them together, is when we see it landing on the landing pad, that the landing pad is clearly much larger with the lights. We go by the lights again, than the actual ship. And then there's a center square, which I talked about before, which actually drops down and has the ship on it and goes underneath. And the lights do not drop down. They stay up here on the landing platform. So, and again, this is an approximate scale. I honestly don't know the scale of this base because I just simply increased it 200% from whatever the scale was that he made originally, which we don't know what that is. This is supposed to be 1/350 scale. So that looks really cool for sure. So people have suggested and said, why don't you just get that and use that? So I'm not going to ultimately use it for a couple of reasons. As I said earlier in my builds on this, I really started building this because of the Stargazer kit. And I want to build the Stargazer kit, and I want to light it up, because I've had that for several years, and it's a really nice kit and has an interior, and it's pretty awesome. So I really want to build it up and make it look the way it's supposed to look. So I'm considering an option where I could have this available and just kind of show the actual scale by comparison. In addition, this isn't a model, and I didn't paint it and I didn't build it, so it's basically a toy. So that wouldn't really be a part of my build, even though this is the actual model that I built. So we'll see. I'm working on some ideas with the Stargazer where I can power it independently with a coin battery, which I should be able to do. So I might be able to just have that separate, because I won't need to wire wires down through the base, and be able to remove it or put it on if I want to. And then the same with this. This could easily be put onto here when I display it and just show what the actual scale would look like. But that is really cool. I just really wish that I had some means of either 3D printing something this scale, inaccurate detail, that I could actually put some lights inside, or or if this was in the right scale. But as you can realize, if I made this the right scale, this whole thing would have to be doubled, which would mean that this thing would be far more massive and unwieldy, and not something that I would want to be able to display on my wall. So that's why I settled with this scale right here. But I do really like how that looks. I think that's pretty sweet. I think that gives us an image that we never see in the film, where the Ares would be landed on the base with the dome opening up and that kind of thing. So, all right. All right, so I gingerly was playing with this, and I did manage to get it to pull loose. It wasn't glued on that tightly. So this little top piece is one piece. A little bit of a notch right there that goes in the bottom, which is all open. And I have a very small coin battery. Could probably fit a regular coin battery in there as well, but that'll fit down in there nicely if I want to go ahead and hollow out this part. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna cut this part out because you're not gonna see it, and then see if I could somehow cut out the windows in the cockpit and just put like some minimal light in there, minimal detail, just to kind of light it up and have it all one piece. So that would be pretty sweet. So let me go ahead and play with that a little bit and see what I can come up with. All right, yes, so I was able to hollow that out pretty nicely. It's nice and hollow inside. I also started drilling out with a pin vise the windows so I can cut those out and get a little needle file in there and sand those smooth. And I figured out that I can fit a regular size coin battery. I also have this really little one, but I'm not sure how much power I would get out of that. But this one should fit fine as long as I trim off the wires and put the battery down inside. There's plenty of room. The top just fits on that edge right there, and it's flush. Well, it goes down just a little bit, but yeah, it just fits on that edge. So there's plenty of room in there for that to be accommodated. So that'll work pretty cool. All right, so let me go ahead and keep working on this, see what I can come up with, some lighting and maybe some minor little detailing inside there. We'll see. All right, so as you can probably tell from the other videos, since I've gotten this apart and started hollowing out the windows, I've decided to go ahead and go with this as the Ares on my display. I'm still going to build the Stargazer one, but seeing this one in the proper scale, there's such a huge difference that this just would not look right with the base. And certainly as this whole thing has evolved and gone from my original ideas and original concept to the latest versions that I have, I keep refining it, and this happens a lot, where I refine ideas before I get to the final product. So this was tricky, of course, like I said, because you never really see this in the base together, the dome, to get a real idea of the sense of scale. So we're just making some assumptions on the comparisons, but certainly after looking at all the different things, this one is far closer to the actual scale of that. And now that I can get get it apart, sorry, and I finished cutting out the windows. I did all the windows on the sides, so I can have lights inside of it, and I'll be working on that and trying to come up with a way to have that lit up, like I said. So what I'm going to do, and what I decided to do, this is mostly build except for the interior that I have to continue working on, is once I finish with this one, at some point I'm going to go ahead and reprint the landing pad, pretty much double the size, and so that this will be the right size on that landing pad. And I'll make just the landing pad the base and still have the holes in it, so I can still put fiber optics and light it just like I did on my current one. I'll just use thicker fiber optic. And then that way I can do this one justice and put it in a right scale landing pad, and that'll just be the base of it. And then that'll be a separate model. So I'm still going to be doing that and still working on it. But for this project, and especially since the ship is not the model, the base is the model, the actual dome base, then this will be fine. Plus the fact that I'm heavily modifying this, I might do a little bit more painting on it, like bring back this really dark engines and that kind of thing, maybe a little bit more weathering. We'll see. But if I don't break it, sorry. But that's the approach I'm going to go. They did a good job of painting it, though. It definitely looks like it has some detail and some scale, so I really like that. But what I also want to do to give some more interest on the outer parts of the moon base is I want to go ahead and put on some other ships out there. So one of them is this little tractor that Jerry Schaefer also designed. It's a free file on CG Trader, and I printed a couple. Some of the detail failed, but I'm going to go ahead and modify this in some way and paint it, put that onto the to the outer base as well. And I found a file on Thingiverse for the moon bus. It's got the general shape. It doesn't have any real detailing. You can see the roof is smooth. It has the windows, but nothing on the cockpit in the front. It does have landing gear, and it does have separate engines, which I've had some trouble trying to print to get them to work out right. Here's one of the landing gear. A little tricky on those two. But this one originally that I had printed, I did a couple versions. This is more in scale with this. The 1/144 scale. And again, I arrived at that scale. Well, the way I arrived at that scale is by comparing the moon bus that Stargazer also makes with this, and I'll show that here in a moment. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and print this in a smaller scale, do some experiments and tests, and come up with the size of the moon bus that would match this, because this is obviously not going to match this. This was yet another reason why I decided to go with this versus the bigger one, because I thought about putting the moon bus, but then when I looked at this and compared it to my outer landing pads, this was just way too big, which again sent home the idea that these are not the right scale, which makes sense. I mean, this is 1/144, this is 1/350, so this is 2.5 times larger than this, and so definitely not in the right scale. This is really close to the base I'm building, so this is the one I'm going to go with. So let me go ahead and do some more printing on this moon bus and see what I can come up with for some ideas to create some of those for the outer parts of the base. All right, so I printed out 4 different sizes of the moon bus in a solid form. It came out fairly decently. And I wanted to come up with the right size. Now, to get the right scale, I'm going off of and some of the detailing, my 1/144 scale moon bus from Stargazer. So what I did was I compared this length of this to the width of the Ares 1B from Stargazer, and pretty much this is the width of the Ares, including like the extended little pad parts. So like from the end from this side to this side, I'm measuring the distance. So what I came up with is the largest one I did appears to be correct. It appears to be the right width of this going across. And also the cockpit, if you look at the cockpit sizes, they generally look about the same. So this is what I'm going with. Not very much detail on it. In fact, there's really no window in the front at all. So what I did was I cut out using a cutting wheel on my Dremel and angled down that windshield part. It's not for the windshield, but the front of it. And then I grooved out around it. And I glued a little piece in there to be that little separating part. All right, so what I'm working on right now is I want to use this as an example and put on some of this detailing on the top to make it look more realistic. And maybe some tiny little pieces because it's such a small scale on that front piece as well. Just to add some detail to make it look more realistic. So, all right, I'm just using some very thin, like paper-like styrene sheet, adding a few little bits onto it, and then I'll glue that down onto the top of this smooth part here. So, to add some panels. All right. All right, so I got the detailing on the top of the moon bus. Like I said, I just used very thin, I think it's like 0.010 thin styrene sheet. It's like paper. You can actually cut it with scissors. I've used it lots of times. It's very thin, very flexible. But it is styrene, it is plastic. So I cut those pieces out. I glued them on with some CA glue, just to add a little more paneling. And they'll blend in, of course, once I get it painted. I also created one of the landing gear. I'm not sure of the dimensions, but I used some square stock, and I just sand down the ends to be that beveled look. Once I got 3 of them, I glued a little thin piece of styrene on top of it, and then a styrene tube on top of that. So that'll just glue on the bottom right there. And I'll just make 2 other ones to match up right over here. They have other detail as far as some springs and things. We'll see. I don't know if I'm going to do anything more. If I do, it'll just be some extra little stripping coming down onto it. But you're really not going to see that very well. You're just going to see them sticking out in the silver landing pads. So, all right, coming along really nicely. I'm thinking about doing 2 of these. I printed 3 more of this size. I'm thinking about doing just 2 altogether, I think, on the landing pads outside of the on the outside lunar part. So, all right. All right, so I went back and I hollowed out the file and I printed it the same way, flat down on it. And it came out pretty decently. This one actually has a little crack and I did 3 of them. But what I want to do and what I'm doing with it is I want to do something a little different with the second one. So there is a scene in the movie where Haywood Floyd is talking to the Russians in the space station. I believe they were Russian. And they were asking about what's going on up at Clavius, because the rumor is that there's some kind of a virus or some kind of illness and they're all concerned about it. And he can't really say anything to them. And it's a cover story because of the monolith that they found. They didn't want people going there. So at one point they mentioned that there was, I forget, I'll have to go back and watch the scene again, but it sounds like it's a moon bus or their version of a rocket transport that had an emergency, and it was denied clearance to land. And they were unhappy about it because international law requires that they allow them to land if it's an emergency. And he asked them a question, hope that everything was okay. And they said, yes, fortunately, there were no casualties from it. So what I want to do is kind of show that, like maybe they picked up the crashed moon bus afterwards. So one of the ones that I made, I cut the top off, and I'm thinking of cutting maybe just like a portion around these 2 pieces, cutting the windows out, and then having that suspended up on like a little mini crane. And I had printed this little vehicle here. This was also made by the same creator who made the dome, Jerry Schaefer. So he made these 2. He just made them himself. They're not accurate to anything in the movie that we see, but they are kind of cool looking. What I figured is it has this flatbed part. I could fashion like a crude crane arm and have it like hooked onto this, like it's lifting the top off of the moon bus, and the bottom I'll have underneath, and I'll make it look like it crashed and that kind of thing. So I think that'll be kind of cool if I can find a spot to put that onto the lunar surface there, or somewhere near there, just to give the idea that it's, you know, they're clearing it away or they're doing something with it. So, all right. All right, so as I showed in the previous stills, I used some styrene stripping, some square stock, some round tubes, and I fashioned a little crane arm. And I cut out a little piece in the back of this so that would fit in there a little bit better. Added a few bits of styrene stripping down on it, just to kind of give it an idea that there's some kind of mechanism at work. And what I'll end up doing is suspending something down from this onto the top piece that's going to be cut away. And I'm going to do a smaller section so it looks like it's dismantling it and it's pulling pieces off. It won't be clearly taken off of it. It'll still be above it, so I don't have to worry about an interior or anything. But you can see that that's enough to clear it. So it would be believable that that's what I was doing. And I'm definitely gonna make it look like it's crashed. And at this point, it's just gonna be moving like a section of the roof off of it. And it'll just be raised up just a little bit, obviously separated from it. But I'll paint it up like it would be a normal moon bus, but I will obviously make it look like it's crashed and that sort of thing. And then have this just removing that piece of it like it's slowly dismantling parts of it. So that'll be pretty cool. I like that. And right now I'm just kind of adding some extra interest and extra details on the outer parts of the lunar surface for a couple reasons. One, to give you a better sense of scale. So if you're familiar with the size of the moon bus, and obviously the Ares, which is going to be landing at the base, it'll give you a little bit of an idea. I may or may not use some astronauts. I don't really have any in the right scale for this. If we're looking at 1/350, I can try to see if I can find some files of just like a one-piece solid astronaut. If I can, I might be able to print them at 1/350 scale and get something that's at least believable. They'd be very, very tiny at this scale. So that's the hard part. I don't want to use something too big, because if they're standing nearby, they have to be able to fit into that little domed area or fit into the moon bus. This looks like it could be in scale with that, certainly. And obviously we're not going to see a person inside of it. But I'm going to paint this up similar colors like the whites, some metallic on this, put some black on where the windows would be. So, okay. All right, here's my completed wrecked moon bus, Russian version. My little crane. I decided to put a little magnet on it, getting ready to pick up a piece of it. I used some styrene sheet to, sorry for the focus, to fill in just the areas you're going to see. It looks like some of the walls ripped off, that kind of thing. I'm not going to worry about an interior because it's just going to be kind of crowded together on the moon base, so it'll look like it's a wrecked machine. So, all right, let me again get some primer on all these, and then we'll see about getting them painted. All right, so I took another one of my hollowed out moon buses, and I cut out the passenger section roof. Decided to make it sort of like a cargo flatbed moon bus. So I smoothed it out, put in some styrene stripping along the edges to make some walls, some corrugated styrene sheet on the bottom for the floor. I fashioned a little doorway and some panels for that back section, for the idea that obviously there'd be a door coming from up here at the pilot section coming back, and then they could get out to the cargo area. So I'll make some little cargo boxes or pipes or something that goes into it. Finish up that back edge a little bit. And then I want to cut out the cockpit and make that a little bit. I don't have to make it exactly the same. The thing about it is that I'm using some similar ideas, but it doesn't mean that every machine that they make would be identical to the others, like the Moon bus. So I can have some liberties with the window, like I did in the crashed version of it, because there's a lot of work in that, putting those ridges and everything in it. We'll see, but I'll figure something out with that. Put some more panels on the top and that sort of thing. So, all right. All right, and there is the cockpit window put into place. I was thinking about painting it first since it's all black before putting it in, but I always like to try to keep the plastic without being painted to glue in so it's a better fit. These edges had to go in pretty carefully, so I can still paint that black. It's not a problem. All right, but I think that looks pretty cool. I like this method better than the first one I did. Since this was hollow, it was easier just to cut out that part and then make it all styrene and put it in. But either way, the other one looks really cool too. All right, so let me go ahead and get some detailing, some paneling on this. Make up some landing legs, and then we'll be able to get this one painted as well. All right, so I finished the detailing on my my little Moon bus that carries cargo, and I put a little bit of cargo in it. I wanted to show you that first. It's not glued in, but I just made up some little things that looks like cargo. Let me dump that out. I still have to paint those, of course. And I got a coat of primer on the main Moon bus. So I did something a little different with the landing gear. I went with just 2 of the pads instead of the 3, and I kind of made them sort of like outriggers, as you can see. They're kind of sticking out. The one in the front is angled up a little bit. I was trying to make them a little bigger and more beefy for this type of a vehicle that would carry probably heavier, a little bit heavier cargo, but that's what I ended up with. So all right, so that's ready to start painting. I'm going to do the same basic colors. I'm going to do a white on it and do the black in the front. I was thinking about doing the this cargo bed in maybe like a gunmetal, something metallic. I think that would be kind of cool. Or in aluminum, we'll see. Make it look like it's something different, like it's metal. And then of course I'll paint these up. And the nice thing is I can make these whatever I want. I can make these some metallics or like some blue or red or, you know, maybe some copper for these little coils, this little coil thingamajigger, whatever it is. Oxygen tanks, maybe I'll make those red air tanks. Check a little closer here. All right, but I'm going to again get this painted first, and of course the landing pads, landing gear will be silver or aluminum, like the other one was. And then I can get these painted separately and get those put inside and glue those in place. So, all right. All right, so I begun painting the and detailing the little moon buses that I've made. The main one, I did the landing gear, got those all painted aluminum. Finished up the detailing on the front and got that painted. I fashioned a little teeny antenna using some styrene strip. Painted that aluminum. Painted the windows. And then I went back and I used some vinyl that I had from another Aztec dummy set, and I just cut some little patterns out of it, little teeny specks, little pieces. And I laid those down over it, as you can see, and just got some different gray panels to show up in different places, just to give it some more sense of scale. So that's all complete. I'm really happy with that. I also got painted the little crane that I made and the crashed moon bus. The crashed one, I put a lot of burn marks on it, streaking and that sort of thing, and I put some marks in it, like some damage. A little bit of metallics over top of the metal pieces of the walls that are broken. Just a little bit of black in where the windows would be. Most of them are broken and drilled out. And I deliberately cracked a piece of that and glued it back into place so there'd be a crack there. All right, so that's completed. And then my little crane. I used some Tamiya smoke on the little dome part. That's supposed to be a window, like a clear dome that the pilot would be in. I think that turned out well. Some gunmetal and some rubber black on the treads. And a little bit of silver accents when they painted the little magnet thing. All right, looking pretty cool. I was gonna paint the gantry silver, but I decided to leave that white. I think that would be a little too much metal. And this is gonna kind of go like this, over top of the crashed moon bus. So, okay. All right, let me go ahead and get the cargo moon bus painted, and I'll go ahead and get these onto the base and show you how those are gonna look. All right, so I did decide to go ahead and print out some astronauts. I was able to find a file on CG Trader by Max Gruder, fantastic designer of all the 2001 astronauts that I've used many times. And this one is one piece, which is what was important because I made it very, very tiny. Here's a version that is still on some supports. He turned out the best, but I'd have to still remove him, of course, and be gentle. I also put a couple on that were just standing on their feet, and they printed out. Most of them worked out pretty good. See if I can get that in focus. Yeah, see? Now, a lot of this detail you're not going to make out at this small, tiny scale, but it doesn't really matter. It's still, because it's so detailed as a larger figure, it still looks pretty cool. And once I get it painted a little bit more, that will come out. So all I'm doing on these, I'm going to just put a few of them on the lunar surface next to the moon buses. The only colors I'm using are three of them. One is this Vallejo Model Air aluminum for the whole thing to start with. Then I'm going to use blue, flat blue, on the front and back packs, because I'm going with the theme that you see in the film with the lunar group with Haywood Floyd. They have silver suits with the blue backpacks. Oh, one other color, I'm sorry. Royal Light Gray, just to dab it onto their boots, which quite honestly, I had done one already, by the way, but I'm showing how I do this one. That doesn't really show up much. This thing's so tiny when it's glued down onto the base, so it makes it a little trickier. So let me just go ahead and show you.
It'll be a few steps because once I put on the silver, I want to give it, you know, 10 minutes or so to dry before I start working on the rest. Oh, and then Tamiya smoke, which I like to use for the visors because it's a glossy, but it gives it that darker look, so you can tell there's like a visor there. So, all right, so let's go ahead. Oh, one more thing. And I just have these paintbrushes that I get from Hobby Lobby. This one is smaller, but it's good to put the overall silver because I don't have to be precise. These two smaller ones, this one I'll probably end up using for the visor. This I could use for the backpacks. They're small, but they're not that tiny. But it's just basically dabbing them on very carefully. So let me go ahead. Give me 1 second. Let me go ahead and get one of these loose ones glued onto a little piece of styrene just so I can handle it better. All right, so I glued the astronaut onto this little piece of styrene strip so I can handle it better. He can be easily taken back off, and the bottom of the seat's where it's going to be glued onto the base anyway, so it doesn't matter. I don't need to paint those. I tried to, the one that was on the support still, I tried to trim off some of them so I could hold the supports and paint them, but he had already been hardened with the UV light, so they just kind of were brittle and snapped off, and ended up having to take them off entirely. So I did notice that his right leg did not print right. You can see how it's a little offset there. So he doesn't stand straight. So even though he's a little better detailed, I'd have to have him standing up on something, but I don't really have to do that because I have some other ones that I can use. So I'll work on this one. So he's ready to go ahead now. And so what I want to do, start with my aluminum. And I had requests to show how I paint this, and I've had that in the past, people wanting to know how I paint it, mainly because they're thinking that I'm using, you know, really delicate techniques. But in the case of this, if this had more colors on it and it was a person without a spacesuit and that sort of thing, it would be a lot harder. And the little bit bigger ones that I did for like my for my larger Aries were certainly a bigger scale. Something this small, it's impossible to get any super detail. But what I'm depending on is, first of all, that this print was a larger figure. I printed this at 35%, which actually seems odd to me. I'm not sure what size he was going for, but I guess if it was 100%, it would be in scale probably with some of the bigger spaceships. But it's super tiny. But the nice thing is it had a lot of detail to begin with. So it does tend to retain that when you get it smaller. Plus, the biggest thing is that in your mind, when you see this, you see an astronaut from 2001. Just the very iconic shape of the helmet and all those things. You know, the pose, the backpacks. So your mind does that for you. So I don't have to, sorry for the shaky, I don't have to put too much in there for you to think that's what it was. And if I painted this in your other familiar colors like red or yellow with the orange, that would look even more iconic to you, like I did for the tiny little pods for the Discovery. But let's go ahead and just get some silver on it, first of all. And again, I mean, this is just putting it straight on. I don't even have to worry about being accurate. I can even get it on the part with the visor, because when I put the Tamiya smoke over it, having silver behind it is going to be a help. Okay. And I really like these Vallejo Model Air metallics. I think they're really go on nice. And even though it's Model Air and it's thinner, it has really strong pigment. It really goes on evenly, dry nicely, nice metallic finish. So there we go. So again, very simple. Nothing super major. Let me give you, sorry, a little close up. So you can see already that brings out a little bit of the detail. You cannot quite make out, but his suit obviously does have the ridges in it. But this small, you're really not going to see that. Okay, So let me go ahead and give this about, 15 minutes to dry, and then we'll go ahead and put on the blue, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, so I cut out another one off of the sprue, the supports, and I glued it on as well. Just ever so slightly a little better detail. Actually, the arm's a little more, or this one on the left is a little closer to his body, but that's fine. I like to have some different poses. And I have one other one that I've already painted. So now what I decided to do, I got both of these with the aluminum. I'm going to do one of these with a blue backpack and one of them with a green, because we do see some different colors like that in the film. There's no real indication as to what the significance is. I would tend to think maybe when they first did the lunar scenes that they went with the silver suits, because that's what we're used to. This was filmed in '68, so astronauts generally had either white or silver suits. That was kind of the idea. But only later in the Discovery do we see they have the yellow and the red and the blue, and they clearly have a green because they have the green helmet. But just to kind of give it a little bit of difference, maybe this guy had to get a newer backpack or an older one or something. So all right, so we're just going to start with the blue first of all, and I'll try to keep this in frame. Let me go ahead and get some paint on this. Okay, so for this one I'm using this more smaller brush, and for those of you, I don't know the designations, but this one says 18/0. The big one I used said 3/0, and the smallest one that I'll probably use for the visor is a 20/0. So I guess the bigger the number over 0, the smaller or finer the brush. So okay, so let me get a little bit of blue, and this one still isn't that big of a deal, only because the backpacks are fairly sizable. Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, so, all right. I'm gonna have to do this. There we go. Okay, so. And again, pardon the shakiness at this tiny scale. But the nice thing is the backpacks are nicely raised, so I can get some paint on them without getting it all over the figure, which is nice. All right. Sorry. Front one is not quite as pronounced or large as the back one. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay, hope that's in frame. All right, sorry. Sorry about that, okay. All right. It's not much to it. Let me just fix that one little top corner, sorry. Back in frame in a second here. Yeah, being so super tiny, it's really hard to do this on camera. Okay, but as long as it looks straight, as long as it looks like I'm keeping it within it. And again, you can appreciate the scale of these, just how tiny they are. All right, so let me go ahead and switch over to the green, and I'll do the other one for us. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the green on the left side one. Again, I'll try to keep this in camera. Okay.
Oops, sorry. All right, so
I'm just adding a dab of color. Make it stand out. And some of that where I went just a little high on it, I can go back with some silver and clean it up, like I did on the first one. All right. So let me switch it out again, and then we'll do the Tamiya smoke. All right, and the last thing I'm going to show is the visor. I'm not going to show the boots. They're pretty easy. I'll just have some light gray on those. That's even hardly noticeable against the silver. If these were yellow or red, it would be a lot more noticeable. So again, I'm going to be very careful. This is the most delicate part, so I'm using the smallest brush because I just have to get that little visor, just barely dab it in. So let me go ahead and do this. Hopefully it's on camera. You gotta get a pretty good amount on your brush. Hold on a second, let me get this, some thinner on this. This, to me, a smoke is fairly thick. It's a glossy clear. I'm basically dabbing it on and just filling in that opening for the visor. I'm going to do the other one. Yeah, it does help if you put some thinner on and have it a little wetter, but you don't want it to run everywhere. All right, so I'm just very, very gently dabbing the tip onto that opening and letting the paint, and you got to put it on a couple times to get it to dab on right. All right, so those look good. Hope that was in camera. All right, so that really kind of adds on to the effect. And by no means are you going to see them this close because, well, there's my thumb. These are super tiny. But again, the beauty of it is that your brain fills in the spots. I might have to do just a little more. Well, maybe not. We'll leave it alone. Okay. But definitely the shape of it is what your eye catches. I really don't think it would be worth the time to put some extra things like some blue for the hatches or yellow or something on the helmets. You're not going to see it. You're going to see it like this. You're not going to make out any of that. But you can make out the colors. You can tell that these are astronauts from 2001. So, all right. So these are going to be pretty cool and definitely add some even more scale to the dome base. So fantastic.
All right, and here is the painted El Camino, Lunar El Camino, little cargo moon bus. So I decided to go with the gunmetal on the inside, give it a little different look to it. I did a lot of weathering on this one. I made it look pretty dirty because this is a cargo carrier, like a pickup truck. So it's going to be obviously getting a lot more wear and tear. Painted the landing gear aluminum, little engine nozzles. And I painted up the little cargo. So I did like a metallic brown, but looks like a copper for the little stack of pipes. I just put aluminum on the little box that I made. I did blue on this little, I'm going to call it a air canister holder, and then aluminum on the air canisters, and then the little whatever this electrical coil is, I did some black and some silver, some gunmetal, some other things. Sorry about the dog barking, that's outside. I have my patio door open because it's a beautiful day. Little dog out there barking. And then I got the little teeny astronaut painted. Really hard to show him. So very, very tiny. Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and get these all glued into the ship there. And I'll show you how that looks on the base. All right, and here is a mock-up of all the moon buses. So I decided to put the moon bus on that one up there just to kind of give it a little bit different dimensions. I'm still considering about maybe making some kind of a craft to go in this rounded base. We'll see. I was thinking of something round, not as big as the Aries, but just some little moon hopper or something. But I'll play with that a little bit. But I went ahead, nothing's glued down yet except for the astronauts, because they won't stand on their own. They're just too tiny. So I have two over here overseeing the cargo moon bus. I have the green air pack one and the blue. Looking pretty sweet. They definitely give that a much, much bigger scale and give you an idea of how large this dome is by seeing some little people. And then I put the other blue one over there, kind of directing the crane and picking up the crash moon bus. So that's pretty cool as well. I think that's all I'm going to do for the astronauts. We'll see. I don't know if I have any more that were complete, but I think if I do, maybe one more. We'll see. Possibly if I do something in that round base over there, maybe I'll have one there for that, but we'll see. Okay, but I went ahead and did a new brass tube, and it may not be the perfect size just yet. I just have this black poster paper sitting behind it so you can get a little better idea of it. There won't be anything behind it. It's going to be on a 45-degree angle, obviously, like I've said before. But there's the Aries. And all I did was put a little coin battery with a red LED inside, just to kind of give you an idea. That's certainly not done yet, by any means. I still have to work on that. But that's going to look pretty cool, especially when it's brighter and more distinct. But coming along really, really fantastically.
So I'm going to wrap up this video. I thought I would wrap up the entire build on this, but I still have more work to do on fashioning the interior of the Aries, getting the lights in it. And that's going to be independent because obviously that's not wired down through that tube. So that's the beauty of it. I'll be able to take it off of this, and the battery is inside, and the top will be removable to replace the coin battery. And I can even take that tube out and I can just stick it on the landing pad instead. So let me show you that, and we'll wrap up this video with that. All right, and there's the tube removed, and the Aries down on the base. So that's also pretty sweet. Definitely a much better scale with this base than the one I was originally using for the Stargazer. So okay. All right, so definitely one more video to round this up, and I will be getting that done here shortly and uploading the finale as well.
All right, so that's going to wrap up this video for this week. As I said, I will be completing it here in the next video for sure. I just have to complete the interior for the little Bellfine Aries and the lights for it, and get the post painted for it, and then obviously get the dome parts finished up and glued in place as well, and that'll wrap up this build. So thank you to all my new subscribers. Stay tuned. I will definitely be completing this very shortly and uploading the final video for the finale. Thanks a lot.